Yeah. All right. So here we go. Episode 5. Today we are talking value. So we have Juan, we have Jason, and we have Justin joining us as a special guest today. Uh, if you want to give a quick intro about yourself, Justin, that would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Justin Molloy, multidisciplinary designer and strategist based in Chicago. Background in architecture, interface design, public environments, and brand.
Awesome. So we
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and we'll kick off this episode with a special tidbit. Justin and I share a birthday,
Ooh.
which we uncovered the week before our birthday,
The week before.
which was, a couple months ago. So today we are talking value and what we typically do. Juan, you kind of guide us through the topic a little bit. So what I want to do is pass to you, what are some of the general thoughts as to why this topic, and what's on your mind, and we'll go from there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So hi again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Juan, designer and artist out of Aurora, Illinois, lover of the Smiths, hater of Morrissey. This question comes from last week's topic, when Gina briefly mentioned there are fears among young designers about what sorts of value or what is the value you bring to as an individual contributor to a team. And so that is a great thing, I think, for me, because when I started freelancing out of school, and then I got brought into my internship role and then my in-house role and my first job, it was kind of a little difficult to differentiate, oh, I'm valuable to a client because of XYZ, but I'm valuable to this team because of 1, 2, 3, or, for varying reasons. So the first thing I kind of want to discuss is how you guys were able to differentiate and scale and measure different sorts of values to the teams you've worked with in the past, your own teams now, and then as individual designers and creatives.
Sure. So I think Justin and I both have managed teams as well as been on the team itself. So we've seen both sides of that. What I would kick this off with is design is a very interesting space in general for value, because how do we define that term right off the bat? In a lot of other industries, you can say, if I work X, it produces Y money, or if I do X, it can produce Y outcome. In creative, that is it's a difficult thing to prove a lot of times. So even after 25 years of doing this, my teams struggle with proving value, because sometimes we don't see the full, being a consultancy, we don't see the full chain. So people can be great at their jobs, team members can be firing on all cylinders, but we still may not be able to quantify that to something at the end, because we are not privileged to get that information. So a lot of times with the projects that we work on, we're talking about value, it's very difficult to say our work on X did Y. It would be great if all of our clients were able to give us all that information, but a lot of times the teams we work with don't even know that themselves. It's outside their team's view, not to mention that when you're working on digital tools, creative, very often there's 10 other initiatives happening to try to achieve the same goal, and all pieces can be contributing to that. So a lot of times a digital tool by itself is not a magic wand. You need marketing to be on board. You need content to be produced. You need the executive team to be going with your mission. So that sometimes is very difficult, even as a team, to be able to prove it. As an individual, there's a lot that I think is different when you're junior versus looking and building a team, in terms of how am I sure that I'm bringing value. And I'll say kind of how BBG or me, I consider this. And this is what I tell everyone when they ask me, like, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? Because we're a small company, I typically say, if you want to make a salary, you need to bring in 3 times more of that salary to the company through your work, business development, and that is how we are able to pay something like that out in value. That's not all companies, but that's how I would think about it. If you're a designer and you want to make $50,000, you should be able to do $150,000 worth of design work or more to prove that value. And it's because when you think about it, where does that money go? Well, we have to stay a business, so we need to make actual money. And at the end of the day, the government takes half. So if you make $100,000 as a company, you really end up with $50,000 at the end of the year because of taxes. So when you put it all together, it kind of is how I would look at where people should be able to provide. If you're business development and you're able to bring in $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, you should be able to make, more money than that. But even still, remember that if you were business development, if you bring in $1 million, that doesn't mean that you are doing $1 million of work. You're doing some of that as your work. The whole rest of the team is still part of that. So I think value, the only times I would struggle with it for someone is if all of our time is spent on education and very little time is spent on that person giving back to the company or the team. And that's very difficult for a small business, but it gets a lot easier if you're at a very big business, because they have much more time to invest in you, knowing that you'll be giving back to them.
I was going to, some of it you touched on there, Jason, is related to scale. And I'm kind of thinking of this in terms of multiple scales of people, experiences, and outcomes. When you have people, a little visitor at the door here. When you have people who are junior, okay, sorry guys. When you have people who are junior, you're going to inevitably can you please leave the room?
Junior.
Sorry guys, I've really lost my train of thought there. Okay. What I was going to say is, like, people experiences an outcome. When you have people who are junior, they don't really know yet what their value is, and there is perspective that comes through experience and through outcomes when you're looking back. There's a junior experience right there. Yeah. So what I was really getting at is, when you have the opportunity to look back at a project success, and you're able to determine that value, you really start, you're gaining experiences. You're able to share those outcomes with your team, with others, and your perceived value will inevitably increase over time. It scales up as you get further and further into your career, and then you're able to articulate that as you go back and look at it from a measurability or a metric. I've worked in the built environment where the measurement of success can happen at many opportunities. It can happen at the scale of an experience, meaning the experience of visiting the space was successful or not, or we saw an impact in the way people use the space or the frequency that they use the space. So you're able to have some degree of measurement. Sometimes that, for example, in retail, it equates to sales or lift. In other environments, such as transportation hubs, you might have things related to how much time people spend in that space or how smooth or frictionless the space is. So value can really be equated in different ways in terms of whether it's efficiency, whether it's monetary, means, or whether it's a little bit that more ephemeral condition of what am I worth, and what is my self-worth for the work that I'm doing and how I see myself positioned in it. So to kind of think about that in terms of a couple different scales there. Between the people, the experiences, and then what they then produce as an outcome.
I'll add one note to that because that totally makes a ton of sense, because at the end of the day, someone working on a team is not only coming down to a monetary factor. And so one of the things that I really tell everyone to look at as we work on a project are, what are some of those opportunities? And those ideas can come from anyone at any time in any spot of the project. Look for really cool spots to add value. And this goes for every project. And I think this is an interesting potential tangent conversation piece, is if we're working on a project and let's say it's medical in nature and we're building a digital tool, I would consider a ton of value to be, how do we make this as easy as possible for doctors to do their job? And if we can, at the end of the day, be able to come through and say, we were able to save 5 or 6 steps in this process, guaranteeing an extra minute or two in an emergency scenario, I would see a ton of value in stuff like that. And I think that is in almost every project, and it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to like saving a life in like a medical scenario, but that's kind of an extreme example. But I think that is a really good example of the work that we do should add value to the people that we work with. And so finding those really interesting spots to say, hey, I had this idea. What if we experimented with this? Well, there could be a ton of value that comes through in something like that. So I think what I'm saying for this is that value can be brought through in our creative work too, specifically just from the great ideas and pockets of interesting things that can be brought up during this work that could add value or be seen as adding a ton of value to clients. And a lot of times you can find that in audits, and a lot of times you can find that in the data, but also you could be looking or thinking about spaces that are totally unrelated to what the client is expecting, which could ultimately add a ton of value to the project. And as a team member, that can come from everyone, young or old.
Does that translate to like a junior or midweight designer's potential as well? and like a potential in a project. Like let's say the project is not really that well paying, but like the outcome and the impact for, whatever reasons are tremendous.
Well, think of the reverse of value, which is what can we bring out? What can we put out into the world too? So this is another way of looking at it too, which is with design, we actually carry a lot of power in the work that we do. And a lot of times it's corporate, but it doesn't always have to be looked at that way. I mean, you talked previous about working on projects that do good, and you felt really good about the work, but you were also involved in bringing good things to the world. So the value on something like that doesn't have to be tied to where you are in your career or money. It's I'm working on a project that looks like this, and I know that I'm able to pass through help. That's why it does feel really great when you get to work on nonprofit work and work that's to help. So that's a different type of value altogether, which is how do you bring in how do you bring good things to life in the world? And junior, senior, leadership, apprenticeship, we all can work on stuff like that and bring value into the world.
What about
So,
oh, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, sorry for the disruption. But I wanted to just add on, the notion of how we give our clients reassurance that what they're doing has value. So this whole notion of the business of design and companies integrating design champions or cheerleaders within their organizations, that help steward the process and really advance the partnership further. So related to that, I think the experience that we have in taking on projects that may involve some risk or risk taking. I think risk comes with reward, it comes with innovation, and there are people out there who are willing to help push that if they really believe it, and that asset in itself is a tremendous value.
Design is inherently transformative for all of our clients on no matter the project, because we're helping to bring change fairly quickly through redoing a product or redoing a space or redoing a digital tool. And I totally agree. This goes back to a stat that's always around and maybe a little bit less prominent now, but and it also ties to an interesting kind of mentality from the zeros, was that lots of companies that wouldn't typically have been looking for hiring designers or design thinkers all of a sudden started getting hungry for that type of brain inside their executive team, because it's a different way of thinking about things. There are design thinking, and companies that embrace that do perform better. And it does go back a little bit to the idea of the designer's brain and the value that we can bring, but not every company thinks like that. And so there are, especially as we work with all different clients in all different ways, they may or may not, they have different levels of openness to design thinking and how we know it can be transformative, which one of the ways that, and for our work, that's why I really like digital, and it gives me the ability to really track everything. So when we work on any project, we're able to look at a before and after. Again, it may not, it may only be one small piece of a much bigger picture, but it is trackable. You've introduced this digital tool. Let me tell you how people are using it. You've added this content. Let me tell you how many people are going there and how much time they're spending and what they do next. So that type of knowledge can be leveraged to add a ton of value to a company. But it definitely goes to what Justin was mentioning about easing a client in to understanding the type of value that they should be looking for, because sometimes it may not be a direct one-to-one. If we do this, this is what happens.
And there's also sometimes a misconception of how much money you're spending equating to necessarily getting more value or quality or a better outcome in the end. Conversely, the least amount that you spend doesn't always afford the best outcome or output that you might expect as well. So there really is no perfect formula for attributing to that, but kind of to what we've said before is that it is a alignment of people, of expectations, of sort of the proposition and the potential vision or outcome itself. When those things align, yeah.
A weird anecdote that goes with that for us is sometimes when a client will come in and are looking to do a project, and if we were to come back and say this project is going to cost $1,000, they're not going to take it seriously internally because they feel that it doesn't matter how that $1,000 ultimately pans out for them. If we were to come back and say it's $100,000, then they realize we have to put people in place to make this successful. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but there's a lot of times with our clients that if we're not charging them enough money, they won't take the project seriously. And then it makes it 10 times harder to prove the value because they don't have the right people in place to ensure that that happens internally. But the flip of that too, I saw it this week. There was a post where someone said, I need a babysitter immediately. I need a babysitter 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. urgent. The need is great. And a person commented in and said, what was the pay? And the person responded and said $15 a day. And the comment under that was, great, so you're expecting to pay someone 24 cents an hour. Good luck with that. And it that sometimes is we're in a space where sometimes that kind of stuff happens because the types of tools that we use come on everybody's computer, and everybody thinks that they can project manage, and everybody thinks they can copyright, and everyone thinks, well, I can edit this myself in Photoshop, and everyone thinks, well, I could probably build this. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a pitch where I'm showing a YouTube video, and the video that immediately follows it is build your website for $9 on Wix or something like that. And it's like, that's not the same type of project, not the same value. It's not the same people. It's not the same tools. It gets into a much different set of the value that we bring to projects.
Yeah.
It's like a big factor is how you frame or position your value prop.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people who just, the value prop is solely, I can do as much as I can for you for X per hour, and that's my value prop. And then there's others that say we want to dig a lot deeper because we know that we can be change makers for your organization, and the value you get, yes, you'll spend more, but the value will be 10x, 100x. And that's sometimes hard to make that sell sometimes.
I think the other aspect of this that we're touching on is this commoditization of design. And it's accessible to everyone, it's ubiquitous. Oh, anyone can do it. And I've seen it where you have people who are trained in design and you have people who aren't trained in design. It's accessible to everyone. Is it equitable? Are you going to get the same outcome one way or another? Sometimes you get better outcomes from different perspectives. I think it all really depends again on that kind of spectrum of equation that we touched on.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Juan, is there any other questions that are kind of burning out there? Let's spitball those really quick, and then let's determine how we wanna wrap it.
Yeah, the big one for me is when I'm like seeing changes in design trends and emerging technologies. So like 1 year, UX was completely meaningless in like 2005 or whatever, and print was still like the moneymaker, and advertising was everywhere. And now it's flipped, and digital experiences are, the king. And so, as a designer, as an individual, or as a team, do you guys think changing strategy and basing value upon which things clients prioritize is smart, or do you think you should always stay true to what you kind of feel is generally, acceptable, if that makes sense?
Well, the terms become trendy, and the companies that don't understand will often overpay for that because of a trendy term. So UX has been around a long time, and once it started to become a job title, companies that were large were like, we need UX designers immediately, and didn't even necessarily know what to be looking for, and were people who just put UX on there. That's why there's a million boot camps in the US that teach UX and slash UI, because that's trendy for the companies to determine that they need those people. In the end, it's design. It's design as one of my professors used to say. But I think that companies who are smart can pick through that. If you're on the side looking for a job, it'll probably help you if you are going after what's trendy. I saw a $900,000 AI job posted today, because that's what's trendy right now, AI. So for me, you have to be smart enough to pick through or see through the trendy term into what can that person bring to the team, because so often I'll talk to someone who says, yeah, I'm a UX person, and I say, are you on the research side, are you on the UX design side? And they may not even know how to break those two apart, and then you'll find out, well, this person has never actually interviewed people, this person has actually never gathered data, this person has never done any of the UX research, this person has done all on the UX design side, but their title doesn't break that up. And so you have to look at the skills in general too. BBG has a UX researcher who solely focuses on UXR, and she is kick ass at that. That's her thing, but she doesn't want to then do the design portion of it and test the visuals, because she's focused on solely the research. So she sticks to her guns. And I would say, for young designers' sake, go with what makes you happy. Don't change for the sake of what's trendy today, because it's not going to be trendy next year.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's also a notion of that in terms of what is the right skill set for people, right? There's the T-shaped designer, there's the generalist versus the specialist, or having deep knowledge in a specific area, but being able to apply that to a broad number of areas of practice or market segments. And I think that has tremendous value. UI, UX can, like you just saying, Jason, is design, can be applied to so many, whether it's a physical interface, whether it's a digital interface, whether it's, something something more time-based or dimensional.
All right, so we will be wrapping up. Juan, any last question?
No, but that last tidbit, again, I agree, design is design. But I think when you start adding titles, things can start getting overwhelming for people who don't understand or know how to quantify things.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you guys for the clarity on that,
That's a whole other piece that I think is really important is I've had an intern who worked with us who left and immediately changed their LinkedIn to creative director after an 8-week apprenticeship with BBG. And I think that when we're talking about titles, which can also be a great video on its own to talk about how a designer progresses through their career, there really is nothing. We are not a licensed organization where you have to have certain skills and certain levels of things to say that you do certain things. And so that one opens up the opportunity for people to call themselves whatever they want. I just tell people I'm a designer and I've been doing it for 25 years. There's other people who want to rush through and add a title to something, which one might confuse a company, and two, it might ultimately mean that the company hires someone that isn't ready or trained or has enough experience to actually accomplish that role. And sometimes you can sneak through, but also sometimes that's a very dangerous proposition, because if the person who is brought in for that particular role isn't capable, it puts the value of all the other people on the team at risk, which is it's hard to understand or see that unless you're in a team building, or you can see it a little bit more topically, but success and value is the whole team combined. And it's sometimes hard to kind of pick that apart when there might be someone on the team who doesn't get it or got in there and probably shouldn't be in that role, but is there because that's what they said their value is. So my last thought here is always try to bring as much value into any project as you possibly can, whether or not it's the scope of work or not. If you are part of it and you see a really good opportunity, talk about it. Bring it to the client. If you see really great opportunities for the team, bring it to your team and talk about it. Don't sit on anything. And the more that you can do those types of things, the easier it is to really see the value and impact that you have in the project, because you're involved in more things than just hand on mouse.
And with increased trust, the value proposition gets better. I think there is what you're talking about there, Jason, is also when you bring more to the table, your value increases very rapidly.
Yeah, and now I'll add a last thought, but that's what makes relationships in creative better than just the first time. The first time when we do a project with someone is the getting to know you project. So yes. If someone could really believe in you, if a company really believes in your team, you can bring so much more to the table as you learn more about their company, are involved in more projects of wider scope. It makes it easier to see and understand how to connect the pieces. So oftentimes we only work once with a team, but I see a ton of value in multiple back and forths on different types of stuff, because then you know much more about that where you can potentially touch to add value. And that doesn't usually happen in the first time. That's more of a scramble. It's the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. And hopefully then those people count on you to be a brain and continue to help them push it forward as like an outside bolt on.
Amazing.
I think that's a great note to be able to end on, is the relationship factor. Without that, you really have nothing, because it's all comes down to people.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for
Thank
joining
you.
us. I know tough day, tough time to be doing this, but
Yes, thank
greatly
you.
appreciated.
It's reality. It's the way it goes.
Yeah. And Juan, thanks for bringing us all together again. And we'll wrap it there. And we will see you for a future episode. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you both for having me. Appreciate it. Lots of fun.